Hello everyone, I'm Mary Ennie, and welcome to Crime Enigma. In the early days of 2023, in the quiet expanse of Waller County, Texas, a chilling phone call shattered the post-New Year calm. On January 11th, less than 2 weeks into the new year, the local police department received a communication that would lead them to a scene of unimaginable horror. A father, Rodney Dykus, in a state of evident shock and distress, requested an ambulance and police to an address on Ocala Boulevard. His words painted a fractured, terrifying picture of his son's wife. He stammered, was down, and horrifically, there was no head on her body. The victims of this brutal act were Jared James Dykus and Angie Diaz, both just 21 years old. They had embarked on their marital journey in October 2022, less than 3 months prior. Their wedding photos radiated joy and excitement, the hopeful smiles of a young couple eager to begin their life together. But the promise of those smiles had dissolved into a nightmare. The couple lived in a small house situated on Jared's parents' property in the rural outskirts of Magnolia, Texas, a town named for its beautiful trees, about 45 miles northwest of Houston, a place that had only legalized the sale of alcohol in 2011. In such a small, relatively peaceful community, violent crime was a shocking anomaly. On that fateful afternoon of January 11th, Jared's parents, Rodney and Lynn Dykus, had gone over to the young couple's house to check on Angie. What they discovered was a scene no one should ever witness. Angie lay dead on the floor, her life brutally extinguished, her head severed from her body. Terrified, the Dykuses called the police. When officers arrived, a carefully constructed image of a perfect new marriage began to disintegrate, revealing a far darker reality. Angie Diaz's life had ended in murder, and it was her own husband's parents who had made the gruesome discovery. The immediate questions were terrifying. What had gone so catastrophically wrong in such a short span of time? Was Jared responsible? And if so, what could possibly motivate such an atrocity? Angie Diaz was described by many who knew her as a young, vibrant, and caring woman, always seen with a smile. Her co-workers at the meat market where she worked expressed deep sorrow, saying she would be dearly missed. Her family hoped to bring her body back to her native Nicaragua to be laid to rest. A somber remembrance was held, where those who knew her best gathered, her bicycle, which she rode daily to work, standing as a poignant symbol in the center. Her mother, Danny Diaz, speaking through unimaginable grief, described it as the worst thing that could happen to a mother. When police and first responders arrived at the Dykus property, a place they had visited before due to issues with Jared's older brother, Wayne, nothing could have prepared them for what awaited them in the small house at the back. An officer described seeing the front door open, a towel on the floor with what looked like ink spots, which, upon closer inspection, I revealed themselves to be blood. A medical first responder, hesitant to contaminate a potential crime scene, peered in. A desk with a computer was visible, and then, stepping further inside, the full horror, a body on the floor, clearly without a head. This was no longer a medical emergency, it was a homicide. Police officers took over, confirming the brutal details. Angie Diaz had been decapitated. Her head was later found in the bathtub. The floor of the main room was saturated with blood, littered with cigarette butts and blood-stained clothes. The murder weapon, a blood-stained knife, lay near her body. Bloody footprints led from the bedroom into the bathroom, a grim trail marking the scene's final, horrific act. Angie's husband, 21-year-old Jared Dykus, was present at the scene. He was immediately taken into custody. There seemed little doubt of his involvement in his wife's death, or, at the very least, his knowledge of it, according to his mother's statements during the initial 911 call. While strange behavior doesn't equate to murder, it was a deeply ominous sign. Police questioned Jared's brother, Wayne, about Angie, trying to gather basic information like her maiden name or date of birth, details he struggled to provide, only knowing she worked at Chappie's meat market and was, in his words, family. The questioning understandably distressed the Dykus family, who were assured they weren't suspects in the same way Jared was, now cuffed in the back of a police cruiser. The officers, many of whom knew the Dykus family, were shell-shocked. One officer admitted that upon hearing of a possible death at the address, he had initially suspected Jared's older brother, Wayne, who had a history of meth use and prior brushes with the law starting in 2018, might have overdosed. He hadn't expected Jared, barely old enough to legally drink, to be involved in something so violent. Jared, born in 2001, had lived in the Houston area his whole life, attended Waller High School where he played football, and generally seemed like an ordinary, responsible young man. He worked as an electrician and even appeared to care deeply for his troubled older brother, despite Wayne having once stolen copper wire from him, an incident Jared reported to the police but later seemed to regret. If the family anticipated drastic trouble from anyone, it would have been from Wayne, not Jared. Jared had met Angie Diaz by chance at the Chepi's meat market where she worked in 2022. Angie, born in October 2001 in Nicaragua, came from a background of hardship. Her biological mother, a single parent, had often worked abroad in Costa Rica to support Angie and her siblings, leaving them in the care of her sister. Angie inherited her mother's dedicated, hard-working attitude. She was an ambitious young woman with an academic mind, studying accounting at the National Autonomous University of Nicaragua at Leon while living with her aunt, who became like an adoptive mother. When Angie was 18, her aunt was diagnosed with cancer. Her biological mother, then working in the U.S., paid to bring Angie and her brothers across the Mexican border into the United States as undocumented immigrants. Angie arrived in Texas, taking a job as a cashier at the meat market while also promoting her skills as a personal trainer on social media. She seemed happy, excited about her future, and diligently sent money back to Nicaragua for her aunt's cancer treatments. Her social media posts, often in Spanish, reflected her resilient spirit, with messages like, "Celebrate your own victories because no one else understands what it took for you to achieve them." Angie's mother, however, was wary of her daughter's fierce ambition upon arriving in the U.S. She recalled Angie wanting to work immediately to pay off debts and handle everything, while she advised patience. Angie was adamant she didn't intend to work at a cash desk for long. She had ambitions for a bright future, and she quickly figured Jared into those plans after meeting him. As a former football player, he likely appeared exciting and impressive, and she fell head over heels. Their social media posts together were filled with declarations of devotion. They married in October 2022 around Angie's 21st birthday, in what seemed like a whirlwind romance. However, according to one of Angie's closest friends, the path to marrying Jared was not straightforward. Angie had previously been dating another man, Jose, and had been planning to marry him in the U.S. Preparations were even being discussed. Then, suddenly, Angie announced she wasn't going to marry Jose anymore. She confided in her friend that Jose's personality had changed. He had become distant and wasn't paying attention to her. Her friend, being older, advised her that if she didn't feel good with him, it would be better to end the relationship rather than marry someone she no longer understood. Angie took this advice and broke off the engagement with Jose. It was around this same time that she met Jared, the All-American varsity football player, perhaps symbolizing the pinnacle of her ambitions in Texas. Her friend recalled Jared bringing Angie roses and little gifts, and Angie always saying how sweet he was to her. Everything in those early days seemed idyllic. Angie's relationship with her own mother appeared strained by this stage, possibly due to conflicts between Angie's desires and her mother's perception of what was realistically possible. Angie was living with her aunt in Waller instead of with her mother in Houston, and reportedly didn't even tell her mother about her marriage to Jared. This seemed strange, given that a primary reason for coming to the U.S. was to be with her mother. Perhaps Angie wanted to keep her new life and new love separate, believing it would be so much better, a completely fresh start. But the couple's idyllic social media posts hid a darker, more troubling side to their relationship. One friend believed they might have rushed their wedding due to an accident Angie had, which led to fears of deportation. This friend had advised Angie to take their time, get to know Jared properly, set boundaries, and ensure he respected her, having seen other women suffer abuse in similar situations. Angie, desperate to stay in the U.S., where she was building a life with friends, family, and a job, likely saw Jared as an ideal way to secure her future there. Her uncle, with whom she briefly lived, also cautioned her against marrying solely for documents or to legalize her status, urging her to marry for love. Angie insisted she loved Jared deeply and that their marriage was genuine. Her uncle agreed to be a witness at their wedding. When Angie introduced Jared to her Spanish-speaking friends, cracks began to show. One friend recalled an incident where Jared became irritated during a gathering because he only spoke English and couldn't understand their conversations. He seemed frustrated, and Angie would get nervous, constantly translating for him. They even gave him the nickname Rojo Red because of his red hair. He appeared unable or unwilling to engage, sometimes leaving gatherings abruptly. He seemed to feel alienated. It wasn't just Angie's friends who noticed a change after she married Jared. Her boss at the meat market also observed that Angie started to seem unhappy. She became more withdrawn and nervous at work, and Jared would reportedly come to the counter looking for her constantly. On January 10th, the day before her murder, Angie came into work, and her boss immediately knew something was profoundly wrong. Angie didn't look well. Her boss spoke with her and noticed bruising on Angie's shoulder, which didn't appear to be from an accident. That same day, Angie confided in another coworker, Erica, that she was going to separate from Jared, that she was leaving him and would never get married again. When pressed about how bad things were, Angie allowed her coworker to see more bruising. Angie revealed they had been arguing all night on Sunday, which was why she looked so unwell on Monday. She hadn't been allowed to sleep. She stated that she had been taking a shower when they argued, and after she got out, she was assaulted by her husband. The purported reason for his anger was that she had gone out with her aunt on Sunday, and he didn't want her to go out with anyone, not even her aunt. This appeared to be a breaking point. Angie wasn't happy with the way Jared wanted her to live, and she had told him she wanted to separate. She had also confided her intention to leave him to her coworker. Jared Dykus was in a volatile state leading into 2023. In November 2022, he had been arrested for driving while intoxicated after acting aggressively towards employees at a local Whataburger restaurant. He had resisted arrest, punched windows, and had to be placed in a restraint chair for a blood sample. By January 2023, he was out on bond for this crime, and his erratic behavior hadn't ceased. While Angie didn't explicitly tell Jared's mother, Lynn, that she was scared of Jared, her actions suggested deep unease. Angie had requested that Jared stop sleeping in the same house as her. This was hardly the request of a couple in domestic bliss. Just before midnight on January 8th, 3 days before Angie's murder, the Waller County Sheriff's Department received a strange call from Jared, who sounded distressed and possibly delusional. Paramedics were dispatched, but he called again minutes later with the same confused statements. When paramedics reached him, they took him to the hospital. It was discovered he had been using methamphetamine, his older brother's drug of choice. This revelation devastated his parents, Rodney and Lynn. Lynn recalled confronting Jared about it and his initial denial, but they recognized the signs from their experience with their other son. Lynn expressed her heartbreak, stating Jared was the son that didn't do that stuff. While acknowledging Jared wasn't a perfect kid and had issues with drinking too much when partying with friends, she maintained he was responsible with work. The night of this 911 call due to meth use was the same Sunday night Angie said Jared had hit her. On January 11th, the day of the murder, Jared returned from work around 4:00 a.m. He went into the house he shared with Angie, and his parents didn't see him again until 12:30 p.m. When he came to their main house, his mother, Lynn, heard an unfamiliar phone ringing. Jared claimed to have multiple phones, but Lynn recognized it wasn't his. When she finally got him to show it to her, she found the phone's language was set to Spanish. She immediately suspected it was Angie's phone. Worried by Jared's behavior and this discovery, Lynn and Rodney rushed over to the young couple's house to check on Angie. Rodney entered first, saw the horrific scene, and urged Lynn not to come in. Immediately calling 911, Jared, at that time, was reportedly in his parents' house, lying on the floor, crying. The police's working theory was that Angie's murder was the culmination of escalating tension and abuse. She had wanted to leave, and he had allegedly killed her to prevent it. When police interviewed Jared, he admitted to recent meth use, claiming he'd never used it before that final Sunday. He was initially evasive, responding with long silences. When pressed about what happened, and if Angie deserved it, he mumbled. Just to control, investigators appealed to his conscience, highlighting the heartbreak he'd caused Angie's family. Jared expressed remorse, stating, "Drugs just make you feel crazy, and I just lost my way. I lost my way with God." He then made a startling claim that a voice, something on his TV screen, had forced him to do it, had told him how to kill her, and that it wasn't Jared who committed the act. However, under further questioning, he admitted to cutting her hair off and that Angie had been awake when he got home. His claim of a fugue state or lack of control was contradicted by the apparent presence of mind to try and clean himself up. He denied any voices told him to hurt his parents, raising questions about his ability to control his actions. After the interview, left alone, he curled up on the floor in a fetal position. Disturbingly, CCTV footage from the meat market where Angie worked, the place they first met, captured Jared at 12:49 p.m. on the day of the murder, only about 8 hours after he would have killed his wife, casually walking towards the fridges and stealing a beer. He drank it in the parking lot before driving home, where his crime would soon be discovered. His father, even in the initial 911 call, cried about how this could have been prevented, seemingly believing something was deeply wrong with his son. Jared's mental competency became an issue during his prosecution, but a court-ordered evaluation found him competent to stand trial. He subsequently pleaded guilty to Angie's murder. As part of his agreement, he waived all rights to appeal the verdict and was sentenced to 40 years in prison in August 2024. The question of why lingers. He claimed a drug-induced psychotic break, and he did test positive for cocaine and marijuana, though not amphetamines. But the rushed marriage, Angie's vulnerable immigration status, and the clear suggestions of escalating abuse all imply that this horrific killing was not an isolated incident out of the blue. Angie Diaz, a young woman full of ambition and life, had her future brutally stolen in a crazed attack. Her family and friends remember her as an angel, a beautiful light, a Sanawa, whose contagious joy touched everyone she met.